Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Imperfectly Better, a podcast that documents the real time process of growth, improvement, and change. I am your host, Cody, and actually today I am joined by my co host, Mama. Mama is a cat. She's sitting on my lap as I'm sitting here recording my words, and she's doing a pretty good job of offering support. I hope everyone is doing delightful since the last time I connected in, or if you're tuning in for the first time, hello, nice to have you here. I did first want to express some gratitude and thanks to the friends and people who have listened to the first podcast episode. I ended up getting a lot of really positive feedback from it, and it lifted me up in a lot of good ways. Heading into it, recording it, and releasing it, I wasn't sure how people would respond to it, or even if they would listen to it at all. But what I found is that people really appreciate the authenticity. They actually found value in what I talked about, and they even said that they didn't think I was rambling on or talking in circles or doing any of that, which were really my worries, was that I couldn't be deep enough or that I couldn't express myself well enough. And to get that positive support that said, hey, this is pretty awesome, it gave me some good confidence with recording this. And it's something that I'm grateful for and appreciate. And I'm grateful and appreciative of the positive and supporting people in my life. But what I wanted to talk about today was actually the first episode that I recorded, because for me that was a significant moment that I had been working towards, just working on eliminating the things that were in my way as far as perspectives, beliefs about how the podcast should go, and anything that was preventing me from finally being able to get it out. But now, the first episode is out. The podcast is no longer just an idea, it exists. And with that, some things have shifted and changed that I felt were worth talking about in a podcast episode. I would say that what has shifted and happened, as a summary, was that before the first episode, this podcast was theoretical. It only existed in my mind, my planning documents, and my direction on where I wanted to go. But now, it's real. It has an actual online presence. People can go and listen to it. And there's actually been quite a bit that has shifted for me. And I do want to clarify that I'm not going to be talking much about the creation of episode 1. I've already talked about that in the first episode, if you've already checked it out and heard it. What I'm talking about here is everything that has changed as far as my perspectives, what I experience, my emotions, my feelings, ever since I finally published that first episode. So I would like to first talk about what some of the things that I noticed were as far as shifts inside of me. And what I noticed was that the accomplishment of finally releasing an episode, of finally reaching that point where I got something out there, was kind of quiet. It didn't come with, me fist pumping the air going, hell yeah. Like, I didn't do that. It just felt like I finally reached a point that I had been working towards. There was still that satisfaction of doing something meaningful, but I had also noticed that my fears and worries about if I could get that first episode out there, if I could really do this, had shifted. Before, it was like I'm going public and putting myself out there, especially with the branding, considering that my face is right on the podcast logo image and on the website and just out there. But it really did open me up for people to see me, hear me, and respond to me. And now that fear about initially putting myself out there has transformed. Now it's more so about uncertainty. Like, where's this going to go? How is this podcast going to be received? And what's going to end up happening with me with going on this journey that I have chosen? Because a lot of podcast creators talk about a podcast as being like a journey. And especially with what Imperfectly Better is about, this is a journey for me that extends outside of the podcast to me. I think really why a lot of this is coming about is because something imaginary can only be imagined. Like, as long as it exists in my head, instead of out there in the world, I can continue to work with it. I can continue to adjust outcomes or prepare for things. But now that there is something real, it's something with form. It has strengths. It has flaws. It's no longer something that just exists in my head. It's something that is built, grown, and worked upon. But with that now having form and structure, I've also noticed that the action of creating that first episode also became guidance. Like, it just became natural to me to see that my tools needed some fine-tuning so they posed better questions. I needed an easier way to update the podcast across all the platforms that I'm on, so I got the RSS feed all sorted out. The second episode idea, because of that, just came about naturally because I noticed that a lot was just shifting for me as I moved about from when the first podcast episode was put out and when I'm recording this right now. And it's just so interesting because before this, I had spent a lot of time trying to think and reflect my way into clarity. But some clarity only showed up after there was something real for me to respond to, something for me to build on. So that action became guidance. Like, here's a fun way to think about this. And this is something that popped into my head as I was reflecting on this and working through it. But The video game Legend of Zelda, Ocarina of Time. Think about it like this. And, sorry, but spoiler alerts for an almost 30-year-old game. You wake up from your prophetic nightmare about the big bad of the game. And you wake up and your goal is to go inside the Great Deku Tree, fix this tapeworm problem, and then get on your merry way to save the world. So, you originally start in this closed-off area, the Kokiri Forest, and you work your way through it, you complete it, you take down the boss of the area, and then what happens? The whole world opens up. You can now go and explore far more of Hyrule. But there's still more that you have to do. You have to go save the Gorons because they have a mineral deficiency problem, and you gotta go pull a Jonah and the whale to save the princess of the Zoras. So there's all of these different things that you still need to do, but there's also the side quest stuff that just adds more onto you. Like you can go get more heart containers, you can go find more treasures and items. Unfortunately, I don't think the example of speedrunning and finding bugs and exploits in your own projects and passions quite applies to the real world, but you get my point here. It's that the completion of one action, the completion of something that you're working on, doesn't often end a lot of the things that you're dealing with. It just transforms it, and then it opens up more possibilities for you. So when you open up and go through one door, that reveals to you more doors. There is another thing that I wanted to touch on from the first episode, and that actually applies to this episode too, which is the feeling of something being good enough, or being able to feel satisfied bringing a task or a project or an effort to close because it is good. And I wanted to clarify what that meant. So for me, it means it's just ready enough to release, or it has reached a point where you're emotionally comfortable with it. What it means as well is that you don't have to optimize out every single issue before you are good to go. Oftentimes, something being real, something being authentic, means that it has flaws, it has imperfections, but it does not mean that it is bad or incorrect. So a good example of this that I've worked through is, what does it mean for a home to be clean? Is it that there aren't miscellaneous piles all over the place? Is it that everything is fully dusted, fully organized? At what point is your home clean enough? So I used to beat myself up over how there were all sorts of miscellaneous things I wanted and needed to do before my home was considered clean. Then there was this day where I had been cleaning for half a day, getting a lot of good work done. Vacuuming, getting laundry done, scrubbing down bathrooms and bedrooms and all of that. And I stopped and looked around my apartment, my home. I saw how neat and tidy things looked, yet I knew I still needed to dust, go through all of these little miscellaneous things like tidying up the drawers and closets, scrubbing the baseboards, all of these little things that I felt like they still needed to be done. And I asked myself, why is this not clean enough for me? The reason I was asking that question wasn't about excusing myself out of action. The question was about getting myself to see what I had accomplished and really being able to see that, yes, the home is clean. I have done a good job. And through asking that question, it's not like those things that I had to do didn't go away. It was that I could relax and appreciate what I had done, and to be able to say that I had cleaned. But the point here is that there's always going to be something to do. There is always going to be some kind of cleaning to do. But an extension to this podcast, there's always going to be some way that I could make this better, some way that I could improve this episode and make it better and better and better. But when is it enough? When have I finally reached a point where I am satisfied? The key here is about knowing when to start and when to stop. The question here isn't, is there anything left to improve? Because there is always something left to improve. The question is this ready enough to honor the work that I have done and move forward? Because oftentimes we only gain awareness of things once it has been created, once it exists. So start building whatever it is that you want to build. Then listen and respond to what the building teaches you. But there is one thing I would like to address, just because I know that some people would have concerns with the idea of it, which is ready enough, just lowering the bar. That it's an excuse to be lazier. And this is not about being careless. It's not about abandoning quality or putting out sloppy work. It's about not requiring creation to be perfected or made its absolute best before it is allowed to flow and exist. I mean, people don't want to put out garbage. They don't want to create something of a bad quality. What I'm saying is that for something to be ready enough is not being careless or lazy. It means that the work you have put in has enough substance, care, and alignment with what is important to you for it to enter the world. And when you are working on something that matters to you, brings you joy, or has some kind of value to you, then there is a level of quality and care that naturally comes about from working on it. And responsibility and commitment can also bring about the same things. Think about being in a relationship, or even when you do a workout that you're really not looking forward to because your body is too sore for its Lactic Tuesday. You still show up and you still work hard through that workout because it's important to you. fitness is important to you and keeping a good body and staying in good shape means something to you. Really, this is about being able to release the expectations of whatever is important to you from getting in your way of being able to create and experience the results of your creation. And speaking of, I think that's a good point to dive into because I do have goals and expectations for the podcast, but they're not really metric focused. Like, I'm not focusing on listener goals like, oh, if I hit 10,000 listens for the podcast, then I've accomplished my goal. That's not something that I'm really focusing on. That doesn't mean that I don't want the podcast to grow into something meaningful or bigger. It just means that I'm being intentional in the goals that I focus on and set. So my goals are more focused around the act of creation versus the results of that creation. It's all about cause and effect, and being more focused on the cause versus the effect. So the cause, in this instance, is releasing and publishing content, creating it, putting it out there. And the effect is that people listen, people talk about it. The reach and network of the podcast expands, and far more. So without the focus on listeners, it doesn't mean that those things aren't important, because of course I want people to listen to the podcast. It's that if you focus on the effect over the cause, then you begin to open up problems for yourself. You begin to judge your own efforts, actions, and the things you create if they don't hit your goals and expectations. There's also the issue of your goalposts moving. So what I mean by that is, say that I did have it as a goal and a focus to hit 10,000 listens for the podcast. Well, then what? Well, then it becomes 100,000. Then what? Then it becomes 1,000,000. Then what? So you have to be careful about the goals or objectives that you set, where once you hit them, the goalpost gets moved back. If you're not careful with how you're measuring your own success, it results in you losing appreciation for what you're doing and building. And for me, my goals are focused around releasing episodes, creating new content, just reaching that next step, and then figuring out what next step I should take. So in summary, I want people to listen, I want this podcast to grow, and I do care where this goes. But the first person impacted by my own words, actions, and accomplishments is me. Every episode I release changes my relationship with the work that I do. It gives what I'm building more life, more form, more structure. It opens up that world map a little more. And maybe that is just the part we miss when we only measure the effect, when we only focus on the metrics. So the first step does not have to finish the dream or feel like crossing that finish line straight through the ribbon. Sometimes the first step matters because it opens up the rest of the world for you to explore. And that's about all I have to say in this episode, or to give. But as always, if people have questions or need clarifications, I'm more than happy to answer them and give additional info on what I mean with certain things, or even to explore where my perspective might be lacking. But I will say that with recording this episode, I felt pretty good, a lot more relaxed. And I actually have the next 3 episodes planned, and I'm excited to pursue those because those are starting to do the deep dives into different topics, different things that I've explored, and really beginning to get into the meat of what this podcast is all about. And as for you, the listener, I appreciate you for joining in on this episode. I hope you come back around for the next one and for future ones. As always, I do have a link to my website in the show description, and there's a lot more sources for you to be able to listen to this podcast from. But outside of that, thanks for joining in, and I hope to see you next time. Bye.